I'm going to
Speaking
interpret
of
that way
Trump
as well.
truths, his post on Truth Social, he did have a hell of a one yesterday. It reads as follows. Everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action! Exclamation point. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be, in all caps, all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. In all caps again, release the hostages now. 63 hostages are believed to still be in the captivity of Hamas. Of the some 250 who were taken, 71 have been confirmed dead. So we don't exactly know the precise numbers of who is alive, but we believe it's some 63. And this is what he said when he was running too, that those hostages better be released before I even get sworn in. And it's a very interesting situation because the Trump base, the MAGA base, is non-interventionist, right? They really are not very pro American power and might being exercised militarily. Trump, I've said this before, is a little less that way than I think many in his core base. But this is Trump clearly threatening some sort of, I think, military action. I mean, maybe I'm overstating it. Maybe it's just some sort of sanction I'm not reading. But in any event, what if they don't release the hostages before he gets inaugurated? Any thoughts?
Yeah, cut or screwed. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
They're not going to be a major non-NATO ally anymore. They're going to be running into the bomb shelter, is the implication of what he is saying. I kind of agree with you, but maybe I would sand off some of the edges on his base being non-interventionist or him being non-intervention. I think some non-interventionists did vote for him, but he's always been a Jacksonian, right? So he doesn't like nation building. America doesn't like nation building, if we're being honest. A lot of our interventionist and neoconservative pals still are kind of in denial about that, but it is just true. We don't like, Americans soured on Afghanistan, we soured on the Iraq War, and we had reason to. So we don't want to go and put boots on the ground, but doesn't mean we don't also want to avoid like punching someone in the face if they take some of our people. So Trump is a Jacksonian. He's in the Andrew Jackson kind of mold of I will absolutely threaten. I mean, this is the biggest, military strike in the history of the world. So he's going to go like a little bit more than Hiroshima. That seems a little bit unlikely, but he wants to talk very, very loudly and have a stick to carry and wave around and then see what you do. I think you will see a lot of scrambling on the part of Qatar, perhaps of Turkey as well, and Iran. And we're seeing all kinds of weird things happening in Syria right now, which is too complex for my little brain to even understand. But I think people are moving on the chessboard very fast because he has a clear difference, not just in the sort of Jacksonian, I'm going to punch you in the jaw with my whole hand kind of approach. But the Biden approach, which I think is often misunderstood, has been mostly like, hey, if we give money to everybody, maybe we just tell everyone to kind of cool it. Just don't get too out of hand in whatever you do. So he tells that message to Israel. He also tells that message to Iran. And he tells that message to this guy and that guy. It's sort of like, we want to just kind of, can you please contain it? Like, we're going to support Ukraine, but only until after he lost the election or after Kamala Harris lost the election, do we allow them to shoot with long-range missiles. And I would imagine that came after having a conversation with Donald Trump. So it's a different thing. It's not containment anymore. It is like, no, don't rile us up. If you rile us up, we will absolutely hit you in the face, which has never been Biden's message, but it's definitely Trump's.
I think that's absolutely right. And, there's a lot of people that project their own ideas of foreign policy on Donald Trump because of the sentence that you heard, like ad infinitum, that he didn't start any new wars, that somehow translates into the fact that he's kind of a pussycat on the global stage. I think there's a few things about this. I mean, you think of, Kash Patel, for instance. I mean, this is the most MAGA guy that you see on Bannon's show. And, a week ago, he's like, we have to prioritize our relationship with Israel. And it's making so many of those people, Megyn, that you're referencing, on Twitter and the rest of it, a little upset, a little exercise. Like, this is not what we want. It's like, you do remember the Abraham Accords, right? You do see the polling in Israel when it came to Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, who they preferred by an enormous margin. It was Donald Trump. And they would not prefer that in the middle of a war, in the most brutal war in its history, if they thought Donald Trump was soft on these issues. I mean, it doesn't matter what, I mean, Donald Trump is obviously has a flair for, going big and saying, since the founding of the Republic, nothing like this has ever been seen. As Matt points out, I guess that's Hiroshima and Nagasaki together on one day. He's doing the Donald Trump bluster. But I talked to an Israeli yesterday after this thing came out, after this truth. So someone sent it to him and we were talking, and he is a very moderate kind of guy and had this kind of glow on his face. And we were talking about how Joe Biden never said that. He never came out and said, in keeping in mind that of the hostages that are there are Americans.
Yeah,
and I know that people don't consider them Americans because they're dual nationals. They served in the IDF and they're Israeli Americans, but they're American citizens there. And has there been a constant drumbeat or any drumbeat coming from that podium that Joe Biden's never behind? But I suppose it would be Karine Jean-Pierre saying, give them back and give them back now, or there are going to be enormous consequences. No, we've seen a lot of fiddling with Israel and like, well, maybe we'll have a weapons embargo. I mean, does anyone think in the non-interventionist universe that there's going to be a weapons embargo on Israel through Donald Trump? You got to be kidding me. No, that's not going to happen. I mean, Ukraine thing too. I mean, the Russians responded to his ideas about a peace settlement saying, no, this is ridiculous. And you say this is ridiculous to Donald Trump. He's not going to like go away into the night and saying, well, I don't believe in intervention. I think that, the Russian reaction in the last couple of days towards the Kellogg plan of what will happen in Ukraine was one of total contempt. And he's not going to appreciate that. And I think that he is probably telling in Zelensky and the calls with him, amp it up. And then we'll come in and we'll solve it. He's not somebody that's like, just lie down your weapons and let's take what is happening to you right now. That's just not who he is.
You raise a good point about what Trump is about to inherit, right? So we not only have, yes, the hostages still in the custody of Hamas, but the Ukraine war amping up to a dangerous level right before he takes the office. And then, of course, the thing in Syria is just, it's almost hard to get your arms around that Bashar al-Assad could fall, that this sort of dictator, strongman, villain in the eyes of America for decades now. How about he's been in the news forever? I mean, since I feel like I can't remember not having it be Bashar al-Assad as the boogeyman of Syria and the chemical weapons and the whole thing with the civil war there just spun out of control. And now it's like he could go down. One of the major cities in Syria fell to these rebels. And one of the presidential palaces, but not his, but he could be forced to flee. I don't know where it's going to land. But then you look at who's rising, and you're like, right? The dictator, because these groups who are sort of storming the palaces and taking over the cities don't look all that friendly to the United States or Christians or peace lovers, and yet they're trying to sort of say, we've reformed. You could work with us. Stability is what's best in the Middle East. That's not what Donald Trump is walking into.
No, it's not. And on the Syria thing, just quickly, that, the group that is taking over vast swaths of the country and took over Aleppo, which is a city that used to have 50, 60,000 Christians and is down to about 10,000. And they say now, and there's been some reporting on the ground, we'll see how this pans out, that this group has been, broadly ecumenical on their way in. They were surprised that they weren't being, executed, arrested, whatever. There hasn't been some sort of ethnic or religious cleansing. But keeping in mind, Megyn, to your point, these are people, one of these commanders was in U.S. custody at one point in Iraq. I mean, these are people that have denounced their association with both ISIS and al-Qaeda. I mean, do we believe that? I very, very highly doubt it. But we get back to that situation that people came to in 2006. It's like Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. He was a scumbag, and he was the butcher of Iraq for so long. And as Assad, keep in mind that he was granted that position from Hafez al-Assad, his father, who was also a butcher in Syria. But the Syrians, of course, have been supported by Hezbollah and by Russia. Russia's carrying out airstrikes in Aleppo today. They hadn't done that since 2016. So, I mean, this is a chaotic situation that Donald Trump is inheriting. And this is not one in which you can make a deal. You can't make a deal with these people. I mean, these are people that don't give a shit about America. These are religious extremists on one side. A country like Syria has been America's enemy, and Hezbollah, who's been America's enemy for a long time too. But they saw the opening, and that opening was because of what Israel was doing and what Ukraine was doing. Ukraine had the Russians bogged down, and the Israelis had taken out almost the entire Hezbollah leadership. And so the vacuum is being filled, and that's the Middle East, and that's what Donald Trump is inheriting. And
Iran's eye was on the Israel ball and what's happening to Hezbollah, and maybe potentially wondering how the hell its main proxy got dragged into the Israel Hamas thing when it wasn't really for a while. Yes. Anyway, we're like all the forces came together to make things a bit of a powder keg, not a bit of, like an actual powder keg right now. And so Trump, as much of a deal maker as he is and a negotiator, and, yes, I think instinctually non-interventionalist, but also he doesn't fuck around. He's not afraid to drop a bomb on Soleimani, that kind of thing. He's going to have to play this just right, because we actually do have a number of conflicts that are begging for our intervention, and an American populace that doesn't want it. I don't think the American populace wants to get involved in anything involving Iran or Syria or Russia. I think they'd like to see us out of the Ukrainian conflict, Kmele.
Well, I was just going to say that we haven't even talked about the situation in Asia. I mean, there's a weird Ukrainian connection with the North Koreans sending troops to Russia to participate in that conflict. The news today about martial law being declared in South Korea. And then there's China, and there's always China. And there's certainly the conflict that's roiling with respect to tariffs and the likely implications for China there. But we're always watching China and Taiwan. So there are so many broiling conflicts at this point and potential conflicts. So Trump is really going to have his hands full. And to the extent he does have some deal-making savvy, it would be wonderful to see him deploy it. I do wonder what kind of conversations he's having with the Saudis at this point where the Middle East is concerned. I mean, that to the extent there were things to celebrate with respect to foreign policy during the Trump administration, like the Abraham Accords and the progress that seemed to be made there was something. And it almost certainly helped to precipitate the horribleness that Hamas unleashed on October 6th. But I do wonder like what kind of conversations are happening there, because if they can get the Saudis back to the table in a more meaningful way, perhaps that can help to unwind things. But I certainly don't have any expectation that Hamas is actually going to comply with the request. Certainly the early statements don't suggest as much.
But Matt Welch, that raises such a good point, because think about it. We started the show talking about the media, like, oh, he's damaged his legacy. Joe Biden has with this pardon of his son. He's tarnished his perfect legacy. And, you were saying this is so absurd. Like, look what he did during COVID and so on. And look what he did in the Middle East. Look what happened with respect to the U.S. foreign policy during the 4 years between Trump leaving and Trump returning. Things are on fire. And there's been no accountability. And by the way, the media doesn't hold Joe Biden accountable for any of this. There's no talk anymore about the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal and how provocative it was, or just, the abandonment of the Abraham Accords and the road that we were on, not toward solving everything in the Middle East. That's too grand a goal, but towards stability there. Like I said, stability. So Trump goes back now. It's like one step forward, two steps backward. It's going to take a lot just to, I don't even know if it's possible, just to get back to where we were in 2020 when he was voted out.
One thing to think about it is that the Abraham Accords are still in place. They're still strong. They haven't really backslid. One of the first things that Biden did upon becoming president said, yeah, okay, we're keeping the embassy in Jerusalem, and the Abraham Accords are still with us. He saw the point of it, which is not surprising. I think that we have, as Americans, a tendency, with some understandable reason, but we do it to excess, of always casting ourselves as the major player in every conflict.
Like, can I just say one thing? I'm going to let you finish your point. But the thing, yes, okay, fine, to your point. But one of the very first things that happened with Joe Biden was he humiliated himself in front of the Saudis. Remember, he embarrassed us and himself when he went over there, and like he didn't actively
saying
pursue.
He wasn't going to.
Yes, after saying he wasn't, and then he tried to like strong arm them, and it was a humiliation. It was another Barack Obama type of humiliation for the United States on the international scale.
I am nobody's fan of Saudi Arabia. It's a very mild way of putting it. I think they've had a very malign influence on American foreign policy. To me, the most humiliating thing that's ever involved with Saudi Arabia is George W. Bush walking hand in hand in his ranch in Crawford with I forget which member of the House of Saud that was, but it was just gross to see that happen. It wasn't Bandar. Bandar, whose nickname was Bandar Bush because he'd been so friendly with Bush family stretching back decades. But, this was the country where 15 of the 19 hijackers came from. And many of them came to America by working around the normal visa channels. There's a lot of bad stuff. It hasn't been a great relationship. Every single administration, Democrat or a Republican, but to different degrees, has been overly reliant. Saudi Arabia always puts itself in the middle of any peace process. Sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't. One of the things that they were asking for the Biden administration is that they want to become a major non-NATO ally as well. That's the thing. They want security guarantees from us in addition to the many scores of billions of dollars worth of hardware that they pay for. And they've been holding up a lot of normalization with Israel dependent on that. I don't want us to give them that security guarantee. I don't like the fact that we gave Qatar that security guarantee. They don't deserve it. And it's part of the like, let's have our fingers in every little pie. There are better ways and worse ways to do the Middle East. None of them are going to guarantee that the Middle East is going to work out well in the end, because it almost never does.
The October 15th deadline has long passed. Are you prepared for what's coming? Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Missed the deadline to file for an extension? Now that October 15th is behind us, the IRS may be ramping up enforcement. You could face wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures if you have not yet taken action. But there is hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and has filed over 10,000 tax returns. They specialize in helping people reduce their tax burdens. So visit tnusa.com/Megyn or call 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you could save. Give it a try now before the IRS takes more aggressive steps. Take control and visit tnusa.com/Megyn or just call 1-800-958-1000. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.